Good evening and welcome to tonight's Undaunted, bringing into the news on George stories. I am Oyi Okbala. Let's begin. In our chilly reminder of the worsening insecurity in the southern Cameroons, Bamenda Divisional Officer Ngoro Nicholas narrowly survived an armed attack on the 16th of July in Limbe Faku County. Though heavily guarded, he was critically injured and had to be rushed to Douala for emergency medical attention, underscoring the alarming reality that not even top officials are safe. If those laced with security details are targets, what then becomes of civilians and ordinary Ambazonians? While authorities continue to preach peace and normalcy to the outside world, on the inside, they are literally fighting for their lives. This latest incident comes on the heels of another tragedy that has sent shockwaves through the University of Bamenda and the nation at large. Armando, a beloved student senator, was brutally beaten to death by a colonial police officer in Bambili after seeking help when locked out of his girlfriend's residence. His death has sparked outrage, grief, and fresh calls for justice and reforms. Together, these events lay bare a nation in crisis where violence, fear, and impunity are the new normal. All of this we'll talk on tonight's Undaunted. But first, let's get the prime headlines. I will start with the call for justice as colonial authorities silences fears outrage over students' death. A husband of deceased Marceline still on the run, while Ambazonian government denounces Southern Cameroon's alliance as old deception in new form. Bamenda Divisional Officer survives gunmen attack amidst the ongoing security concerns in Southern Cameroons. On the African scene, Togo holds key municipal election amidst political turmoil and protest calls, while deportation flights with 95 Haitians land in Cap Haitien amid the U.S. immigration crackdown. Now let's get the news in full detail. The University of Bamenda community and the general public are still reeling from the tragic death of Armando, a student senator who was brutally beaten to death by a colonial police officer in Bambili. The incident, which occurred after Armando was locked out of his girlfriend's residence and sought help, has sparked widespread outrage and condemnation. However, what has further fueled the outrage is the colonial authorities' silence on the matter. Despite the overwhelming evidence and public outcry, the colonial police officer responsible for Armando's death remains at large, and it appears that they'll be protected by their hierarchy. This blatant disregard for justice has shown fears that the colonial authorities are more interested in shielding their own than holding them accountable for their actions. The protection of the colonial police officer by the hierarchy is a clear denial of justice for Armando and his family. It sends a disturbing message that the lives of Ambazonians are not valued and that those in power can act with impunity without consequences. The community demands justice for Armando and an end to the impunity that has come to characterize the actions of the colonial forces in Ambazonia. The people of Ambazonia will not forget Armando's sacrifice, and the struggle for justice and accountability will continue. And so Ambazonians are urging the colonial authorities to take immediate action to apprehend the police officer responsible for Armando's death and ensure that justice is served. The world is watching, and it is time for the authorities to demonstrate their commitment to justice and human rights. Rice and Base here. Welcome to tonight's Undaunted. Rice and Base here. Can you hear me? Hello, Barrister. Moving on to another disturbing story. Last week, we talked about a lady whose husband has been on the run, and Undaunted reported on a very devastating incident that shook the city of Bamenda as a woman, Marceline, lost her life after being brutally beaten by her husband. Now, the incident which occurred earlier this week sparked widespread outrage and condemnation, highlighting the need for urgent action to address domestic violence and bring culprits to book. According to reports, Marceline had been a victim of long-term domestic abuse, and the situation took a deadly turn when the couple got into a fight. Despite being rushed to the hospital, Marceline succumbed to her injuries. As the community mourns the loss of Marceline, a hardworking and determined woman who ran a thriving hairdressing salon, her husband remains on the run. The manhunt launched to apprehend him raises questions about the ability of the colonial forces of law and order to bring culprits to book. The fact that the husband is still at large has sparked concerns about the effectiveness of the colonial justice system in addressing domestic violence cases. Will the colonial authorities be able to track him down and ensure justice is served? A question on the lips of mourners. This incident is a stark reminder of the need for collective action to prevent justice and also prevent domestic violence and protect the rights of women and girls. The ongoing war in Ambazonia has exacerbated economic hardship and radicalization, contributing to a culture of impunity and violence. And so, as the community is demanding for justice for Marceline, it is actually very essential to examine the systemic failures that allow perpetrators to escape accountability, responsibility. The people of Bamenda and beyond are watching to see if justice will be served in this particular case. Still on tonight's Undaunted, we would move over to the voice of Ambazonia. Now, the government of Ambazonia has denounced the interim government of Ambazonia. I beg your pardon, the government of Ambazonia, through Dr. Martin Mongwa, the Secretary of State and Communications and IT, has issued their scathing editorial denouncing the newly formed Southern Cameroons alliance, calling it a rebranded faction rooted in past divisions and failed diplomacy. The alliance, led by Malam Atam, and aligned with imprisoned leader Sisiko Ayuk Tabe, is accused of operating outside the established structures of the Ambazonian struggle and undermining the ongoing fight for independence. The statement warns against a secret Zoom meeting scheduled for the 19th of July, alleging it promotes a destabilizing agenda. Key concerns include efforts to rebuild separate armed units outside the recognized Ambazonian State Army defense, disbursing of unmonitored stipends, and reviving controversial platforms lacking public mandate. The editorial also criticizes the alleged promotion of the Somaliland option as an unrealistic shortcut. Prominent legal scholar Professor Carlson Ayangwe was also signaled out for his role in creating the IG Care faction, which the government claims contributed to harmful divisions without delivering diplomatic results. But in contrast, the editorial praises President Dr. Samuel Ikomesako's leadership for upholding constitutional governance, pursuing international legal actions, and championing a total boycott and lockdown of the 2025 colonial elections in the Cameroons. The alliance, the statement notes, has failed to denounce the elections, the BS regime, or the ongoing genocide, which is an omission the government calls a betrayal. So according to the voice of Ambazonia, no elections, no deceptions, only sovereignty, has declared this editorial. And for all you to know, the voice of Ambazonia is broadcasting across the homeland and the diaspora. Now let's take a listen to the voice of Dr. Mungwa.
This is the voice of Amazonia, broadcasting across the homeland and the diaspora. The editorial title is The Mirage of the Southern Cameroons Alliance and the Return of the Old Deception. Fellow Ambazonians, once again, at a decisive hour in our struggle, a new phase of an old deception emerges. This time, it comes dressed as the Southern Cameroons Alliance, led by Milam Atam, longtime associate of Sisiko Ayuk Tabe. These are the same voices that once distanced themselves from the Swiss-led process, only to later embrace the Canadian illusion, and now, under a shroud of secrecy, are calling for mobilization ahead of La République du Cameroon's colonial elections this October. The question is not just what they're proposing, but why now and under whose command? Their July 19th secret Zoom meeting speaks of revolutionary readiness, but beneath the passionate language lies a dangerous blueprint: rebuilding military units outside the established Self-Defense Council, paying stipends with no transparency or institutional oversight, reviving the Another Local platform, a shadow group with no people's mandate, pushing the Somaliland option, a reckless shortcut ignoring the realities of our war. These actions bypass the legitimate government, discredit the House of Assembly, and undermine the very structure that holds Ambazonians' fight together. Let us also be honest about Professor Carlson Ayangwe, a brilliant legal scholar whose early contributions are undeniable. But, it must be said, he helped create the IGK faction, an alternative government that deepened division at a critical time and has not advanced the cause diplomatically or institutionally. Contrast that with the steady and strategic leadership of President Dr. Samuel Ikomesaco, whose vision rests on a constitutional government with separation of powers, ground strategy coordinated through a central self-defense council, diplomatic filings at the ICC and UN bodies, a clear stand, total boycott and lockdown of the October 2025 elections. The Southern Cameroons Alliance makes no mention of shutting down the elections, no denunciation of BIA, no rejection of the colonial CPDM machinery, no condemnation of the genocide, just silence. And in politics, silence is betrayal. So, to our people, especially the youth, we say, reject secret platforms, reject elections under occupation, reject unaccountable structures, support the October lockdown, stand firm with the legitimate government and the House of Assembly. Let us not chase illusions. Let us not reward those who return only when they smell power. Let us rise behind vision, law, and unity. The greatest threat to any revolution is not the oppressor's guns, but the opportunist's confusion. We are the voice of Ambazonia, and our message is clear. No elections, no deceptions, only sovereignty.
Barrister Mbeseha, welcome back.
Thank you for having me back.
All right, so let's start with the first story you missed out because of technical difficulties and hitches here and there. On Monday, when we started the report for this week on Undaunted, we talked about the student who was beaten, about the colonial gendarmes and all of that. As of today, the report today is projecting that students are demanding, probably through a protest or through a documentation, but they are demanding that the police who killed their own colleague should be arrested or should be brought to book, which is what is expected. This incident happened on Sunday or over the weekend. It was reported widely on Monday, and up until today, Thursday, there has not been any indication of anyone being arrested or anyone held responsible for this outrageous evil. So now the question is the students who are protesting. Of course, this is not the first time they are losing a colleague due to the high handedness of the colonial gendarmes. Do you think that there is something else they can do to ensure that the police who or the people who were involved in this acts be brought to book? Are there steps, or would you want them to just see that this is what would happen if they do not join force and support the Ambazonian government and boycott any form of elections? What would your candid advice be at this point?
There are two aspects to the thing. It's not elections yet. We're talking about a student killed. A student is a young person. Most of them, in the majority of cases, are not above 25. They're young people. And then they are killed, not mistakenly, popularly acknowledged by officials. Call them gendarmes, call them police, call them anything. And then they kill these young children. Nobody being held accountable. Killing is only one of the several things that they have done to the youths. Call them students in block. But if I got the story well, this event is happening somewhere in Bamenda. The student who died is in Bamenda. And so what's the difference between a youth in Bamenda and a youth in Kumba or a youth in Kambe? But remember that back in 2016, the thing that started this revolution, which has become war, was the torment they gave to students who are all youths in the University of Buya. And so what do the students really mean? They can get their voices should be heard. But if you leave the thing to the Bamenda students alone, it's not going to go very far. The student in Bamenda should be as angry as the student in Buya, as the student in Kambe or Wum or Mamfe. And so they have this singular opportunity to make their voices heard. Death is the maximum that they could give, but the students have undergone different other forms of torture. Girls in particular, they have been raped. And so what is important is that they should raise this issue with whatever means they have. The other means they have, they don't have guns, they don't have spears, they don't have their voices. Either to go out and demonstrate where they will shoot them, if they do, or they hurt them, or they can adopt other methods. Another method of this thing of silent disobedience is to stay home, stay away from classes. You don't want to do lectures that will affect the universities. They will listen to you. And that thing, that cry should be carried out in Bamenda. If this university student, it should be carried out
We would go over to another audio of the voice of Ambazonia. Well, this time around, it has issued a sharp editorial that was titled The Missing Man in Abuja. Malia Matam must speak, calling for public accountability from Malia Matam, a prominent figure in the early days of the Ambazonian independence movement. Now, this editorial revisits the January 2018 abduction and extradition of the President Siko Ayuk Tabe and 9 cabinet members in Abuja, Nigeria, an incident that many see as a turning point in the struggle. William Mata, a co-founder of the SCASCUF and a key mobilizer, was expected at the ill-fated Abuja meeting but failed to appear, later claiming he was delayed in Kigali. However, investigation reportedly disproves that claim, placing him in Nigeria during the time in question. The voice questions Atam's shifting narrative, lack of transparency, and refusal to cooperate with subsequent inquiries initiated by the government led by Dr. Samuel Ikome-Sako. His silence, the editorial argues, has fueled suspicion over the political complicity or betrayal. Now, amid reports of a closed-door reawakening initiative led by Atams and ahead of Cameroon's upcoming presidential election, Ambazonian media outlets, including the Voice of Ambazonia and the Independentists, have confirmed receipts of an invitation to a virtual meeting on the 19th of July. So the editorial poses 10-pointed questions to Atam, demanding he clarifies his movement, his alleged contact with Nigerian or Cameroonian authorities, and why he remained unarmed while others were arrested. That's a good question. Now let's get to find out why.
This is the voice of Ambazonia, broadcasting across the homeland and the diaspora. Today's special editorial is The Missing Man in Abuja, Milan Atam Must Speak. Fellow Ambazonians, the name Milan Atam once rang out with power and promise. He stood on our right to freedom from tyranny. But today, his name lingers in a cloud of silence, suspicion, and unanswered questions. Milan Atam, co-founder of SCACUF, and later a figure in the so-called Southern Cameroons Alliance, has become the missing man in one of the darkest chapters of our struggle. The abduction and rendition of President Sisiko Ayuk Tabe and the 9 members of his cabinet from Abuja, Nigeria, in January 2018. Touted then as a key strategist and mobilizer, Milan was expected at the Abuja meeting. Instead, he vanished from the scene, and when the dust settled, the leaders were gone, kidnapped, and delivered into the hands of our oppressors. He claimed he was delayed in Kigali, but travel logs and investigations suggest otherwise. There is no evidence that Milan ever transited through Kigali. In fact, it is strongly alleged that he was already in Nigeria days before the fateful arrest. Even more troubling, he later said he arrived at the hotel, saw no one, and assumed that our leaders had overslept from drinking. But we know the truth. Most of them do not even touch alcohol. And then he claimed he saw Nigerian security forces asking about him and simply walked away. No arrests, no confrontation, just a quiet retreat. How convenient. When the new government was formed under President Dr. Samuel Ikome-Sako and investigations into the Abuja incident began, Milan Atam was asked to provide testimony. He refused and stonewalled, and he was fired. Still, he remained silent. Now, in 2025, he resurfaces, calling secret Zoom meetings under the banner of reawakening, mobilizing from behind closed curtains, just months before La République du Cameroon's presidential elections. May he use that meeting, scheduled for Saturday, July 19th, to finally speak, because the independentists and the voice of Ambazonia have received the invitation, and yes, we will be there. Here are the questions the people demand answers to. Where were you, Milan Atam, between January 3rd and January 6th, 2018? Why did you lie about passing through Kigali? Why did you suggest our leaders were drunk and hungover? How did you walk away unharmed while Nigerian agents were searching for you? Why did you not raise an alarm or inform the diaspora when the leaders went missing? Why did you let us sue the government for firing you? What changed between your 1 year break and your sudden trip to Nigeria? Who did you meet in Nigeria? Nigerians or Cameroonian officials? What deals were discussed? And can you prove with immigration records where you really were? Fellow Ambazonians, we cannot be naive. Leadership is not performance. It is accountability. The blood of our people cries out for truth, and the revolution will not be sold behind our backs. As we approach a decisive moment in our history, we remind you, freedom is not negotiated in whispers. It is won in the open with courage and clarity. Let the man who missed the meeting in Abuja come clean. Let Milan Atam speak if he still can. This has been the voice of Ambazonia. Truth, resistance, and sovereignty. Thank you and have a happy rest of the day.
Right, thank you so much there, Dr. Mungwar. Barrister Mbeseha, welcome back.
Oh, thank you. I don't know where he even had me because I seem to have gotten frozen.
All right, you would want to continue with your advice to the students and what you would recommend. Let's start with that.
Yeah, what I was saying in the last segment, though I got cut off by some misfortune, is that students have a unique, they're very, very important, and they're powerful. And then I said, if I got the story well, that student was in Bamenda. And so the student killed or wounded in Bamenda is as important as a student in Buea. It's as important as a student in Mamfe, in Cambe, or anywhere in Ambazonia. And I reminded us that this crisis started, which has become war, in 2016. It started with the humiliation of students in the University of Buea. Those girls were robbed in March, disgraced and even raped. The trauma is still on them. Since then, other young students have gone through the same trauma. The student, be it in Bamenda or Buea or anywhere, hasn't got any other weapon other than his or her voice. But yes, voice singing alone, it would be like a tree, a single tree in the forest. It must be a chorus. Because if in 2016, for example, the students spread all over Ambazonia, including Bamenda, had reacted to the torture, to what their friends and their age mates were going through in Buea, the problem would be different. And so they should, I said that this is a university student. Most of them are young people. And let us not think that the university students in Ambazonia are only limited to the University of Bamenda and the University of Buea. Now, there are many other private campuses that have youths. They're all university students. They're all in the same age range. They go to different universities, private and public, only depending upon what money you have to pay if you're going to private, or what course you want to follow, depending upon the school. You're all in the same age group. If you go out to demonstrate, they must shoot you, I said. You don't have weapons to fight. So, but you have a singular weapon that is very, very meaningful. That weapon is staging a sit-down. But that thing should not be limited to Bamenda, where the student died. Other youths across that country, Ambazonia, should follow suit. If there's a private university in Cambe, one in Banso, one in Mamfi, wherever they are, they should join that chorus and make their voices heard. It is not about elections. Elections are coming up 90 days from today, 3 months. We're not going to wait for 3 months to hold that guy accountable. Because unless you act, they will never hold anybody accountable, because the same narrative will repeat itself. Investigations are ongoing. No results will ever come out. Nobody will ever be held accountable for what they are doing. And so a quiet sit down will defeat anything. Your teachers will come to your lecture hall, they will not find you there. They will not come to your house, to your private residence, and catch you and want to put you in the university. And this is a good time. This is campaign time. These people postulating for elections would carry your story that will go across, not just Cameroon, will go across the world. It will ring bells across the world. And so again, act as a united group. Let them learn to act like that. Let them learn to show solidarity with one another. Where it occurs to you in Bamenda, let the one in Boya be involved. If it occurs to one in Boya, let them be involved. If it occurs to one in Manfred, let the ones in Kambe be involved. Because that's the only similar weapon that you have. We have learned in this struggle that silence, like ghost town, is a very important tool in the hands of a person who has no weapons. And so again, let the strength be encouraged. It's not yet time to talk about elections. No, elections are still far away. We're not going to wait for that. We're going to take action now. Let those people be held accountable. Because I said, accountability is a rule. Not being held accountable is the exception. And there's no reason why they're taking away of the life of anybody, particularly a young person. Somebody should not be held accountable. Over to you.
Oh, yes, severally, someone should be held accountable. And that's the accountability, we've been seeking for. And when people do the wrong things, especially when it gets to the point of taking lives, accountability is the watchword that everyone is seeking for. Right. So moving forward to this series of Dr. Mungo's audio from the Office of the President that has been titled The Editorial. For today, we are focusing on two of the editorial. And I remember clearly on Tuesday, I beg your pardon, we handled three. For today, we are handling two. People may be wondering why all of this. But remember over the weekend when I asked the question, when I asked you, I asked Barrister Fu, what else can the government of Ambazonians do at this point when it seems like everything they've done towards ensuring that they do not in any way participate in the election is going futile? Oh well, it seems like Dr. Mungwa has
This is the voice of Amazonia, broadcasting across the homeland and the diaspora. The editorial title is The Mirage of the Southern Cameroons Alliance and the Return of the Old Deception. Fellow Ambazonians, once again, at a decisive hour in our struggle, a new phase of an old deception emerges. This time, it comes dressed as the Southern Cameroons Alliance, led by Milam Atam, longtime associate of Sisiko Ayoktabe. These are the same voices that once distanced themselves from the Swiss-led process, only to later embrace the Canadian illusion, and now, under a shroud of secrecy, are calling for mobilization ahead of La République du Cameroon's colonial elections this October. The question is not just what they're proposing, but why now and under whose command? Their July 19th secret Zoom meeting speaks of revolutionary readiness, but beneath the passionate language lies a dangerous blueprint: rebuilding military units outside the established Self-Defense Council, paying stipends with no transparency or institutional oversight, reviving the Another Local platform, a shadow group with no people's mandate, pushing the Somaliland option, a reckless shortcut ignoring the realities of our war. These actions bypass the legitimate government, discredit the House of Assembly, and undermine the very structure that holds Ambazonia's fight together. Let us also be honest about Professor Carson Anyangwe, a brilliant legal scholar whose early contributions are undeniable. But it must be said, he helped create the IGK faction, an alternative government that deepened division at a critical time and has not advanced the cause diplomatically or institutionally. Contrast that with the steady and strategic leadership of President Dr. Samuel Ikomisako, whose vision rests on a constitutional government with separation of powers, ground strategy coordinated through a central self-defense council, diplomatic filings at the ICC and UN bodies, a clear stand, total boycott and lockdown of the October 2025 elections. The Southern Cameroons Alliance makes no mention of shutting down the elections, no denunciation of Biya, no rejection of the colonial CPDM machinery, no condemnation of the genocide, just silence. And in politics, silence is betrayal. So, to our people, especially the youth, we say, reject secret platforms, reject elections under occupation, reject unaccountable structures, support the October lockdown, stand firm with the legitimate government and the House of Assembly. Let us not chase illusions. Let us not reward those who return only when they smell power. Let us rise behind vision, law, and unity. The greatest threat to any revolution is not the oppressor's guns, but the opportunist's confusion. We are the voice of Ambazonia, and our message is clear. No elections, no deceptions, only sovereignty.
Barrister Mbeseha, so much effort there. And this is, of course, from Dr. Mungwer, that's from the government to the people. And this is not the first, this is not the second. I love the progression that these editorials are going. You have to join your voice to these as well.
Well, the editorial is actually very important, but you will not understand the editorial unless you understand where we are coming from. Milan Atam is the name, but you must know who is Milan Atam and from where he's coming from. To that, in order to understand, he has mentioned two names there, Milan Atam, one. He has mentioned Professor Anyangwe, too. Those are people who all know them very, very well. At least we know Professor Anyangwe by far better than Milan Atam. But his name is mentioned. But let me get us back a little bit. So we must understand where we're coming from and where they're coming from. When the revolution started in 2016, there was no Professor Onyangwe there. There was no Milan Atam there. Me and you were not there. People who ran the revolution back home then were Agombala and Dikentasan and Nibat Fontem and a few others. That was the executive. And so when they banned the consortium in 2016, it disappeared and resurfaced in Nigeria. When they resurfaced in Nigeria, they created what is called the SCACO because other groups joined them. SCACO stood for Southern Cameroon United Front. This is 2016. It did not last long. SCACO was to be transformed into what they call the Governing Council. That's where the Professor Anyangwe started to play a bigger role. They created the Southern Cameroon's Governing Council, which gave birth to Sisiku Ayuk Tabe as the chairman. Sisiku Ayuk Tabe, until now, had never featured anywhere in the liberation struggle of Ambazonia. He was never in the SCNC. His name was never anywhere. He was not in CAM. He was not in SCAPO. He was nowhere. He was not even in the ADF. But he featured there as a compromise candidate to take the go forward. And the man who ran these elections to bring in Sisiko, the champion that we respected very much, was Professor Anyangwe. Then with Professor Anyangwe came the Sisiko, and then Milan Atam, who acted as his secretary. That was the most powerful supporter of Sisiko. The commonest thing about them is that Professor Anyangwe, Atam, and others, they were all based in South Africa. We were not there, but they created Sisiko as the chairman of the governing council. It was Professor Anyangwe who ran the elections, or the choice. I don't even call it election, because the few people who met there did what they did and were agreed. Nobody challenged them. And so that's the coming in of Milan Atam, which we are still talking about today. Fast forward, the very group championed by Milan Atam, championed by Professor Anyangwe and others, went forward in 2017, that is just under a year, to transform the governing council into the IG, the interim government, in the Zaria conclave, what they call the fourth conclave, which held at the end of October 2017. The resolution stated, among other things, we have formed an interim government with Sisiko Ayoktabe as the president. It didn't say they elected him. They say we formed an interim government with Sisiko Ayoktabe as the president. I think that was resolution 1633 or 32. I still have it here. And so that was end of October 2017. They didn't just put Sisiko there. They created an government. That was not all. They prepared what they call the interim constitution to run that government through to Boya. Whatever time we got to Boya, that was it. It was stated in that document that the government they were forming, called the IG at the time, should be able to take us to Boya. They didn't give it a time limit, not 5 years, not 10 years, no. Said they would take us to Boya. The government, which they appointed Sisiko to lead, and Milan Atam to be his chief secretariat, to be his right-hand man. That was the government they created on the 30th of October 2017. Everybody clapped. I never knew Milan Atam. I didn't know anybody. I didn't even know Sisiko. But we all clapped that at last we found a structure and a leadership that would take us to Boya. No matter how long. They created an interim constitution there. We said again that there will be no elections into that thing. Sisiko hopefully will live as long as the revolution lasted until we get to Boya. And if we go to Boya, the very government would have 3 years to organize election. They will convene a constituent assembly. They will draw a constitution, will be approved. They will hold elections and then elect the rare leaders of Ambazonia, and that will be the end of that journey. The journey of the government called IG, headed by Sisiko, supported by Milan Atam, supported strongly by Professor Anyangwe. That's where we were October 30th, 2017. 30 days into it, just 1 month, came December 2018. January 2018. We're dealing with October 2017. January 2018 came, just about 30 days after that. What happened? Sisiko disappeared. The man who had contemplated would take us to Boya and hold elections there. He disappeared. It turned out he had been adopted by the enemy, along with others, and taken to the enemy's camp, imprisoned there. That became the problem. It meant that If the man behind the jail, the bar, someone else will have to take that leadership position. They will take us to Boya, and thereafter there will be elections. It doesn't matter how long it will take. This time, they didn't know who. That other person who would take over was not necessarily in Jos, in Zaria, when they were holding the conclave. We tried several things, and we didn't succeed. But at the end of the day, we got somebody else. We got President Sako, who looked like an odd choice to them. So it became difficult. It has remained difficult for them to swallow someone else other than Sisiku. And so Milan Atam, all the other insinuations about him, whether he knew what happened before these guys were adopted or not, I'm not sure. I did talk to him, but I cannot say that he did. He was part of it. Because nobody would have gone to prison. Are you still getting me?
To let you know, there is another audio that Dr. Mungwa addressed directly to Milan Atta. So I would like us to play that so that when you're analyzing this, you can also know what Dr. Martins and the government is saying about attempts. Now, let's get the second audio.
Okay.
This is the voice of Ambazonia, broadcasting across the homeland and the diaspora. Today's special editorial is The Missing Man in Abuja, Milan Atam Must Speak. Fellow Ambazonians, the name Milan Atam once rang out with power and promise. He stood on stages, rallied crowds, and championed our right to freedom from tyranny. But today, his name lingers in a cloud of silence, suspicion, and unanswered questions. Milan Atam, co-founder of SCACUF, and later a figure in the so-called Southern Cameroons Alliance, has become the missing man in one of the darkest chapters of our struggle. The abduction and rendition of President Sisiko Ayub Tabe and the 9 members of his cabinet from Abuja, Nigeria, in January 2018. Touted then as a key strategist and mobilizer, Milan was expected at the Abuja meeting. Instead, he vanished from the scene, and when the dust settled, the leaders were gone, kidnapped, and delivered into the hands of our oppressors. He claimed he was delayed in Kigali, but travel logs and investigations suggest otherwise. There is no evidence that Milan ever transited through Kigali. In fact, it is strongly alleged that he was already in Nigeria days before the fateful arrest. Even more troubling, he later said he arrived at the hotel, saw no one, and assumed that our leaders had overslept from drinking. But we know the truth. Most of them do not even touch alcohol. And then he claimed he saw Nigerian security forces asking about him and simply walked away. No arrests, no confrontation, just a quiet retreat. How convenient. When the new government was formed under President Dr. Samuel Ikomisako and investigations into the Abuja incident began, Milan Atam was asked to provide testimony. He refused and stonewalled, and he was fired. Still, he remained silent. Now, in 2025, he resurfaces, calling secret Zoom meetings under the banner of reawakening, mobilizing from behind closed curtains, just months before La République du Cameroon's presidential elections. May he use that meeting, scheduled for Saturday, July 19th, to finally speak, because the independentists and the voice of Ambazonia have received the invitation, and yes, we will be there. Here are the questions the people demand answers to. Where were you, Milan Atam, between January 3rd and January 6th, 2018? Why did you lie about passing through Kigali? Why did you suggest our leaders were drunk and hungover? How did you walk away unharmed while Nigerian agents were searching for you? Why did you not raise an alarm or inform the diaspora when the leaders went missing? Why did you let us sue the government for firing you? What changed between your 1-year break and your sudden trip to Nigeria? Who did you meet in Nigeria? Nigerians or Cameroonian officials? What deals were discussed? And can you prove with immigration records where you really were? Fellow Ambazonians, we cannot be naive. Leadership is not performance. It is accountability. The blood of our people cries out for truth, and the revolution will not be sold behind our backs. As we approach a decisive moment in our history, we remind you, freedom is not negotiated in whispers. It is won in the open with courage and clarity. Let the man who missed the meeting in Abuja come clean. Let Milan Atom speak if he still can. This has been the voice of Ambazonia. Truth, resistance, and sovereignty. Thank you and have a happy rest of the day.
All right, so you see why verse and Mbeseha. See why I said you should wait and let's get this second audio. Now here we go.
Okay, I got the second audio. What I think happened, well, let me put this on the record. When they adopted Sisiku, as Mr. Mungo says, there was to be investigations. In fact, I was one of the people who was tapped earliest. They called me. Who handled these investigations in the disappearance of Octave Sisiku? I declined. But I talked to people who were I declined. I told them I could not do it because the whole thing involved the Nigerian security apparatus, high government officials, and the Cameroon security apparatus that connived, that worked together to carry it through. We did not, don't have that ability to break those thick walls of security in Nigeria, of Cameroon. We did not have them. So I declined to do it. But on my own, I was able to call a few of the people who were involved there, whose names were mentioned. Among them, Milan Atam. I called him. Among the Manga, I called them and talked to them. Heard the ownership of the story.
My sincerest apologies that we can't still establish connection with the barrister, but hopefully before we are done with this report, we'll definitely give you a feedback on the connection with the barrister. In another sad report, the news making the rounds is that the divisional officer of Bamenda, Mr. Nicholas, has narrowly survived an armed attack carried out by unidentified gunmen on the 16th of July in Limbe Division in southern Cameroons. While his survival is a relief to many, sources say his condition remains critical and he has been rushed to Douala for urgent medical treatment. This is not the first time Mr. Ngoro has faced danger. In February 2024, he escaped an abduction attempt in Ntombo, a locality in Ndu County, underscoring the persistent threat faced by state officials operating in the Cameroon's conflicted war zones. Despite the severity of his latest attack, authorities have not declared any major security alerts or movement restrictions in Limbe or surrounding areas. Administrative and municipal operations in Limbe and Bamenda reportedly continues as usual, with public statements from officials emphasizing calm and urging residents to go about their daily routines. This projection of normalcy, while possibly aimed at preventing panic, may also reflect the government's ongoing efforts to maintain control and public confidence amidst the chronic and chaotic insecurity situation. Critics, however, argue that these instances on business as usual will downplay the real and persistent dangers that civil servants and civilians alike face in Ambazonia. The recurrence of such high-profile attacks raises serious questions about the efficacy of the current security strategies and the state's ability to protect its personnel even in urban areas. As Mr. Angolo receives medical attention in Douala, the incident has once again drawn attention to the fragile security landscape in the southern Cameroons and the personal risks carried by state representatives working to enforce government presence in restive towns. All right, as further updates on Mr. Angolo's condition and any other developments related to the attack, we will definitely be reporting it as they become available. But what this means is clearly normalcy is far from returning. All right. I won't want to confirm if Barrister Mbeseha is back. All right. With this, we apologize for that technical hitches there with our in-house analyst, but you should not worry, knowing fully well that whatever discussions that were not fully handled today, you're so sure that on Saturday, not just Barrister Mbeseha, but a team of other legal minds, Barrister Fu and others, will definitely join the conversation on Saturday, where we'll take a look at all of the happenings, the major highlights of this week, and review them over the weekend. So you've missed today. Do not worry. We'll bring the barrister back on Saturday for another in-house exclusive discussion on Undaunted this week. But before we go, let's take a break. And when we come back, we'll head into Togo to see what's happening there. Togo heads to the polls today, Thursday, July 17, for its first municipal election since sweeping constitutional reforms were passed earlier this year. Reforms widely seen as a pathway for President Ghana to extend his decades-long grip on power indefinitely. Voters are expected to elect officials across the West African nation's 117 municipalities. While President Ghana 59 is not directly on the ballot, the local elections are being closely watched as a de facto referendum on his continued rule. The outcome could reveal the level of public support or discomfort amid mounting unrest and fears of democratic backsliding. Ghana, who has been in power since 2005, following the death of his father, General Ghana Eyidema, who ruled for 38 years, is already one of Africa's longest-serving leaders, as well as Biya. While in May, the Togolese parliament passed constitutional overhaul that replaced the country's presidential system with a parliamentary-style republic. The new framework abolishes direct presidential election and introduces a ceremonial presidency while vesting executive powers in the hands of the president of the Council of Ministers. A role to watch for Ghana was swiftly appointed. Critics say the reform was designed to circumvent term limits and cement Ghana hold on power, effectively allowing him to rule for life without facing voters in a national election again. The lineup to Thursday's vote has been marked by political tension and growing unrest. Human rights groups and opposition figures have decried a wave of repression, including arrests, internet shutdown, and the use of excessive force against demonstrators. On the 10th of July, violent protests broke out in the capital Lome and other cities, with demonstrators demanding Ghana resignation and calling for the restoration of direct presidential elections. Protest organizers have announced further anti-government rallies scheduled for July 16th and 17th, coinciding with Election Day. The government has responded by increasing security access across major urban centers and warning of zero tolerance for what it labels as destabilizing acts. People are rising up because they feel their voices are being silenced. These elections are happening under the shadows of repression, said Jean Eclo, a spokesperson for a coalition of opposition parties. There can be no legitimacy in ballots held without freedom. Analysts say the outcome of the municipal elections could shape the political landscape ahead of parliamentary elections scheduled for 2026, the first under the new constitutional framework. A strong showing by the ruling Union for the Republic party would likely entrench Ghanaian-based power, while gains by opposition and independent candidates could signal growing resistance to political status quo. This is another look in the African scene. While international observers have expressed concern over the lack of transparency and the limited civil space in the lead up to the vote, the Economic Committee of West African States, ECOWAS, and the African Union have urged the Togolese government to ensure the elections are free, fair, and peaceful. As polls open today, Togolese voters find themselves at a crossroad weighing local governors' choices under the looming shadow of a leader whose political longevity shows no signs of winning and warning. Will they be a free and fair election? Oh, well, tomorrow we'll definitely find out if there will be a free and fair election. Well, right after the break, when we come back, we'll talk about the deportation flights with 95 Haitians as they land in the Cap Haitian amid the U.S. immigration crackdown. A U.S. government deportation flight carrying 95 Haitian nationals landed on Wednesday in Cap Haitian as part of an intensified effort by U.S. immigration authorities to enforce removals under tightened border and immigration policies. The plane, which departed from Florida, was met on the tarmac by armed Haitian police officers and immigration officials. The heightened security surrounding the arrival, authorities confirmed that some individuals on board had criminal histories and had completed prison sentences in the United States prior to their deportation. Amongst the group were 11 women. Many of the returnees kept their faces covered as they disembarked, avoiding cameras and declining to speak with the media or identify themselves. The atmosphere was tense, with visibly distressed passengers being led from the aircraft to immigration processing areas. One deportee who agreed to speak on the condition of anonymity and communicated in Haitian Zero shared that he had voluntarily turned himself into U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, the ICE. According to him, he said, I couldn't keep running. I was tired and I thought maybe there would be a chance to work something out. He said, now I'm back here and I don't know where to go. The flight marks another chapter in a series of repatriation operations targeting Haitian nationals, many of whom had been living in the United States for years. The Biden administration has continued deportation flights to Haiti despite repeated calls from human rights groups and Haitian diaspora organizations to halt removals, citing the country's ongoing political instability, gang violence, and worsening humanitarian crisis. The Department of Homeland Security, DHS, maintains that deportations are being carried out in accordance with U.S. law and that priority has been given to individuals with criminal convictions or those deemed a threat to public safety. Haitian officials have expressed concern over the volume and pace of deportations. According to them, they say they are receiving their citizens and we are obliged to do so. Well, but the reintegration process is strained and many of these individuals arrive with nothing. As the U.S. continues its immigration enforcement measures, advocacy groups are calling for greater transparency and a reassessment of the deportation policies towards Haiti, warning that forced returns to an unstable environment could endanger lives and further destabilize communities. The Haitian government has yet to comment formally on Wednesday's flight, but sources within the Ministry of Interior have indicated that additional repatriations are expected in the coming weeks. That's it for tonight on Undaunted. Sincerest apologies for the technical hitches there with the barrister. But this is where we draw the curtains. But before we go, let's take a look at the major stories. All right, here are the major stories that made it to tonight's highlights. Tonight, we told you that justice for Armando has begun as student tries to get to the root of the incident. Also tonight, husband of deceased Marceline is still on the run. Tonight on Undaunted, we told you that Ambazonian government is denouncing the alliance of any form as an old deception in new forms. Also tonight, we told you that Bamenda divisional officer has survived another attack, and it has, of course, increased the security concerns in Ambazonia. On the African scene, we told you that Togo is holding key municipal election amidst political turmoil, while on the foreign scene, we told you that deportation flights with 95 Haitians has landed in Cap Haitian. That's it for tonight on Undaunted. Bringing it into the news on George Stories. On behalf of the team of technicians behind tonight's Undaunted, is good night and God bless.